So I'm based up in San Marino, which is a Pasadena area, and I've been in this business for over 20 years. So I have my own properties that I do things with. I have my own portfolio, and I have investors, and I'm also a real estate broker. I'm actually licensed here in California, and I'm also licensed in Florida. So yeah, so I have a pretty kind of broad repertoire, as you say. But anyway, the mission statement we have for TFS Properties for people we're dealing with is we're trying to give you strong, reliable cash flow. And so a lot of people that we're dealing with, they've been in real estate here in California for quite a while, and we should all be kissing the ground we walk on, right? Because if you've been in real estate here for 5 years or more, you've made a lot of money. But the thing is, as Patrick was just talking about, when we talk about income here, it's not that great. You know, if there's a lot of problems, and the whole tenant issue thing is just getting worse and worse and worse. And I talk to people every day that are saying, look, I've done fantastic with my property here, but there's a point where I want to put my equity somewhere else where I feel that my income is safer. And you're going to learn when we go through things today that the income that you get in other parts of the country is double or triple for the same property that you buy here in California. So again, a lot of the people we're dealing with, they're moving their equity to these other markets. And we're going to talk about 1031 exchanges, because by doing a 1031 exchange, you get to move your money from one place to another and pay no taxes on it, which is a wonderful thing, right? And this is just a quick example. This is a building we sold a little over a year ago for a client down in Mar Vista. It was a 10-unit multifamily. They were getting $61,000 of net income on that property. We put them into some other properties out of state and more than doubled their cash flow. And so we routinely do that for clients all the time. So when we're talking about doing properties out of state, we're always putting people in stuff that's always renovated or it's brand new, because again, you don't want to have maintenance issues. So again, the properties we're going to put you into are in good shape, so you don't have to worry about that. It's going to have a tenant in place already. It's already been leased up. And also we have management that we work with in those particular markets. So again, you know, the biggest complaint when you have rental property is the management, right? Everybody's had a bad experience with a manager. So we're trying to vet the managers. And again, the markets that I'm going to be talking about, we've been in those markets for many years and have my own properties in those markets. So we're pretty familiar with what goes on and you know, how it works. What we're going to talk about a little bit is single family properties. We also do manufactured homes. You see that In-N-Out Burger. We've done a lot of triple net lease properties, which we'll talk about. And also, again, we do listings here in California. Okay, so let's talk about a 1031 exchange. How many people here have actually done a 1031 exchange? Nobody? There's always somebody. Okay, well, this is good for you guys then. So first of all, that number, 1031 exchange, comes from the IRS code section, right? So if you look up the IRS code section, you read all about it. Exciting reading. But a 1031 exchange allows you to take an investment property and sell it. And if you follow all the rules we're going to talk about, when you get into another property, you pay zero taxes, okay? And I deal with people, you know, that have been doing 1031 exchanges for many, many years, you know, especially when you get older and you've been doing this for 20 or 30 years, and they've built up tens of millions of dollars of equity in property, and how much taxes have they paid? Zero. And it's amazing to look at their tax returns and go, wow, he's only showing $50,000 of income, but he's got tens of millions of dollars of property. You know, and so the 1031 exchange process works really well, and there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. Again, I've been doing these for over 20 years now, and I've literally overseen over $1 billion of transactions. So I've seen just about everything that you can do with the 1031 exchange, and then some. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you guys want these slides, you can just email us, or we're going to hand out a thing at the end there. You can fill it in with your email, and we can send these slides to you. People are always taking pictures or whatever during the thing, so it saves you doing that. Okay, so let's just take an easy example. Here's a property that was bought many years ago for $1 million, and over time that property's gone up in value. So today, that property is worth about $2 million, okay? Everybody understands that that $1 million gain is going to get taxed at capital gains, right? Well, there's another tax that a lot of people don't know about or think about, and that's called depreciation recapture. Now what that means is, when you first buy a property, that's called your basis. Okay, so if you're talking to a CPA, they're always talking about a basis. And the basis is the point where you calculate the taxes. Now, for those of you that have rental property, I'm sure you're really excited when you get your first few years of tax returns and you learn about depreciation. Because you get to write off every year a portion of the value of that building, okay? And when you take that write-off, 9 times out of 10, it offsets most, if not all, of the rental income you get. So that's one awesome thing about owning rental property. You get that income coming in, and then you write off the depreciation, and you pay very little, if any, taxes on it, okay? So that's a great thing. The problem that happens is, every time you take this depreciation, it lowers your basis, okay? And so in this example, over 20 years or so, there was $600,000 of depreciation taken on the person's tax return, okay? They actually get to write that off. But when you go to sell that property, you now get what's called depreciation recapture. And so that's another tax that's over and above the capital gains tax. So everybody knows that the capital gains tax, if it's a large amount, it's going to be about 20%. But the depreciation recapture is about 25%, okay? So that's in addition to the capital gain. And then we all have the honor of living in California, right? That means we have the highest taxes in the country. And so right now, if you have over $1 million in income, however it works, you're going to get 13.3% tax. And that's on top of the other taxes we're talking about. So in this example, you could actually, about 50% of your gain is going to go to taxes. Big chunk, right? And so we don't want to do that. And by doing a 1031 exchange, you totally bypass that whole thing and pay zero tax. So it's a good thing. And you're going to find that when you're doing things around the country, if you do, here in California, people are much more savvy about 1031 exchanges than most of the rest of the country. And that's probably the reason why. We have that added 13% tax. Plus, real estate, let's face it, this has been one of the best places in the country for doing real estate over the last 10 or 20 years, right? It's been amazing. And so people are trying to get around the taxes. So when you talk about a 1031 here in California, people seem to understand it a lot better than other parts of the country when I've talked to other, Texas or something like that. But anyway, it's a great tool, and it's important to do it right. So whenever you do a 1031 exchange, you're going to have what's called an accommodator or a qualified intermediary. Now, this is sort of like an escrow, and it's set up so that when you close your escrow, the money can't go to you. Anybody done an IRA rollover or 401k rollover? Yeah, it's the same concept. If you did an IRA rollover, you can't have that check sent to you because that makes it taxable. You send it from one institution to another, and then there's no, they call it constructive receipt. You're not getting the check. And so it's really, really important to have this accommodator set up prior to closing escrow, right? And I kind of hammer on this point because I've had it happen over the years several times, more than once, where somebody's called me up and they say, Rusty, I closed on my property, I got my money, I want to do one of those 1031 exchanges. I go, what do you mean you got your money? Well, the escrow sent me my check. It's too late, it's over. Once the escrow issues that check, they have to do a 1099 to the IRS and game over. You're getting taxed. He goes, well, can't I send the money back and reverse it? No. Yeah, so that's why it's so important that when you go into escrow, you're going to tell your realtor and you're going to tell the escrow that you're going to do a 1031 exchange so that that's all set up, and you have to get some account set up with the accommodator so that they are communicating with the escrow, and then so the escrow closes and they'll wire the money to the accommodator, right? So you don't touch it. Very, very important. No, I say that because about 2 years ago, I still can't believe it, I had a client come in my office. He's like, hey, Rusty, I got my check here to do the 1031. I'm like, and it was a guy that I'd done exchanges with before. And I don't know what happened. He spaced out or whatever. And he's like, yeah, here's my check. We need to do an exchange. I go, it's too late. So that's why I really, I think people get older sometimes and they forget or whatever, but it's just really important. Yes?
Is there a fee for the accommodator to hold the fund until you find the property to exchange?
Good question. She's asking, is there a fee? Is there anything free in this world? Next time you close escrow, get your closing statement and tell me if there's anything free. No, and I don't want to belittle it, but yeah, there is a fee. It's not that bad. It's usually around $1,200 or $900, something like that. And it also depends how many properties you do. So they'll charge you a little extra for each property that you're identifying. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, they're going to charge a fee, but it's not horrendous. And also, they're going to credit you with the interest when your money's parked with them also. So I mean, I did an exchange, and with the interest rates going up not that long ago, I ended up breaking even. The interest I made on my money sitting in the account actually made up for the fee for the accommodator. So it kind of was a wash. Okay, and we're going to be talking about a like-kind exchange, how that works. So first of all, the day that you close escrow is day one, and then the clock starts ticking. So you now have 45 days to identify the property you want to buy, okay? And when I say identify, what that means is you're going to fill out a form, and on that form you're going to list the address of the property and how much you're buying it for and all the specifics on it. And you're going to have to turn that into the accommodator. They have to have some kind of verification that you did that by midnight the 45th day. I've literally done this at quarter to midnight. We turned one in years ago, on the, because sometimes it's hard to find a property. But anyway, you have to turn that in, and they have a record of it so that if you ever get audited, the IRS can see that you identified it, and there's a record of it, prior to that midnight hour. Now, back in the old days, we used to fax things, and you had a stamp from the fax machine. Today, you can email it, and again, you just keep a copy of the email showing the time and date that you did it. Okay, so once you've identified it, you now have an additional 135 days to close the escrow. So that's a total of 180 days. So that means that you pick the property, you put in escrow, but you have to get it funded and closed by the end of that 180 days. Sounds easy, right? Well, the truth is, in a competitive market, it's really tough. And again, I've been doing this for a long time, but if you're not on the ball, you can get a lot of problems. For example, and look, anyone who's bought property, how many people have bought a property and after you get it under contract, you find out some things about it that you didn't know about before? There's a crack in the foundation, the roof has got leaks in it, all kinds of things. I've even done commercial deals where, they found toxic waste in the land where the property was. I mean, all kinds of things can come up, and I've seen it all. So when you pick a property and you go past the 45 days, and then you find out there's something wrong with it, and you want to renegotiate the deal, and the seller's unwilling to renegotiate, and you have to back out of it, you can't go back and change your ID sheet, right? Once you hit that 45th day, that's it, you're locked in. So I'm bringing this up because people we're working with, we want to start working with you way up here. Like when you go into escrow, you usually have 45 or 60 days, right? So that's the time you want to start putting together the deal and getting the due diligence done. Because by the time you hit that 45th day, you want to be really confident that you're going to buy that property and close it. Okay? Does everybody get that? I mean, it's so important because, things have slowed down a little bit, but it's still kind of crazy out there when it comes to buying property. But I've literally had people come into my office on the 45th day or the 42nd day or whatever, and they've put offers on all kinds of properties. They kept getting outbid, and they could never find anything that really worked for them. And so it's a mad scramble during that 45 days. So important. You want to have a game plan, and you want to be putting that plan together long before you go into escrow and close it on the property you're selling. Make sense? Yes?
Have you heard of this called the
Ow.
go under contract with your desired new property before you take the money out of your old property?
Right. Yeah, so she's asking, there is, well, that's actually been around a long time. Yeah. So what you're asking is what's called a reverse exchange. And in theory, it's a great idea. In practice, it's really hard. And I'll tell you why. In a reverse exchange, you go and find the property you want to buy first. You have to buy that property, and then you have to sell your property within that 180 days, right? And close it, and then fund it. But that means that you have to come up with your own money to buy that property first, and then you can replace your money with the money from the property you're selling. So unless you have a bunch of cash or whatever, it ends up being kind of tough to do, depending on the property. But so, I've seen it done a few times, but again, it's usually pretty tricky actually fitting all the logistics together. Yeah?
In fact, maybe when you get into this, so when you identify the property, you say, I'm going to a homeowner, I'm going to buy a property, I'm having to put some sort of a deposit and it's contingent on my funds, which is verifiable as a closing deal. How do I hold that property for that long, for that seller, to wait till I consummate the deal?
Yeah, well, that's the trick. Yeah, you have to have your, again, you want to make sure that whoever you're working with understands all the rules here so that you make sure you hit all those time frames, okay. Right? And so, yeah, that's just got to make sure Like, for example, sometimes people, I've worked with people where we're selling a property, it's called the down leg, the property you're selling. Well, when you're doing the contract to sell it, you put in there, I want to extend it until I find my property that I want to go into, right? So you can do that if the buyer's willing to work with you.
And you have to have a seller who's not going to, someone's getting a higher bid to get your deal, you have it.
Well, again, you got to have it tied in contract. Money talks, right? So once you get that earnest deposit and they accept it, they can't change the deal.
Okay.
You know, in California, sellers have to sell. Once you get that guy under contract, as long as you follow it, they have to sell to you. They can't get out of it. The buyer can always get out of it, right? They can say, oh, there's a problem getting a loan, or there's a problem, you know, with the property, and you can even, whatever you want to do. It's easy to get out as a buyer. It's really hard to get out as a seller. So just get them under a good contract and get a deposit. They have to take money, that earnest money. Yes?
The funds that needs to move to another 1031 exchange, is it the entire amount from the gross sales proceeds, or just the appreciation amount? Like if you have
Oh, good question. I'm going to come down in a minute. Yep. All right, so everybody I think understands this. So now the next thing is, you'll hear the term a like-kind exchange, and that's what it says in the IRS code section. The term like-kind, you know, seems pretty obvious. If you sell an apartment building, you have to buy an apartment building, right? But the truth is that the term like-kind, legally for the IRS definition, is really broad, okay? You can literally buy any kind of investment property as long as it's within the United States. IRS does not like it or allow you to do an exchange out of the country because chances are you'll never pay the taxes on that, right? So they don't let you do that. But within the United States, we can go anywhere. There's no restriction at all. And as far as the type of property, I mean, we've done parking lots, we've done single-family residences as long as you don't live in it. We've done oil and gas leases in Texas, medical office buildings, raw land, triple net lease properties, storage units, really any type of investment property that you're not living in it.
Gold?
Okay, it can't be your home. What's that?
Gold?
Gold? Well, no, we're talking about property though. Yeah, it has to be, you know, it has to be fee simple. You actually own the land, the dirt. Or there's a 30-year lease on that dirt. That applies also. Anyway, so, yeah, so you can do any combination of this also. I mean, I've done deals where a person sold raw land, they ended up buying an apartment building. You know, we've done deals where they've, you know, sold an oil and gas deal and then they bought some other rental properties. So there's any, you know, type of combination of this kind of stuff is totally fine. And then here's just some examples. Again, single family, we actually do a lot of single family in exchanges, but you can't live in it. Commercial office, retail, industrial, triple net lease, agricultural. I actually did an exchange last year of a commercial building I owned, and I bought a ranch up in Oregon, and that worked. And you can do tenants in common, or you've heard of DSTs. So those all qualify. Now, things that don't qualify, your personal residence. Now, I know someone's going to ask, well, how can I make my personal residence into some type of 1031 exchange? Well, I did one just a couple of years ago. I was dealing with a client. He actually had a beautiful home in Hollywood. And so he moved out of that home because he had a huge capital gain in it. And we rented it out for 2 years, 2 tax returns. And then we sold it. And we did a 1031 exchange. And we ended up buying property in Texas for him, rental property. So you can do it. And the other way works too. For example, people say, well, look, I want to sell my duplex, and actually a lady just called me the other day. She wants to buy a place in Arizona that she wants to retire to, and she wants to go live in it. Well, that wouldn't work. But what would work is you sell the property here, you buy the property in Arizona, and you rent it out for 2 years, and then you move into it. You've got to show it on your tax return as being a rental property for at least 2 years before or after you buy or sell it. That make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
For 2 years. So if it's a personal residence, personal mortgage, you have to, in order to convert it, you have to reconfigure the loan into investment property first before you rent it out?
No, you just rent it out. Yeah, just show it on your tax return as a rental. Yeah. Yeah, as long as you're showing it on the tax return and you're showing income and you're getting your depreciation, you should be fine. Now look, I'm not a tax guy, okay? So I'm kind of, this is what I've seen and what I've done myself and experienced. So anything you're going to do, you want to talk to your tax person first, okay? I really have to stress that. And like you asked, for example, you know, when you're selling your property and you have so much gain in it, you can take some of the money out right? But you're going to pay tax on it. But the other thing I tell people is, I've run into a lot, especially people who have done stocks or have a business or whatever, you may have what's called a carry forward loss. So that loss you had from 5 years ago, you might have had a $50,000 loss from selling some stocks, and that stays on your tax return. Well, that loss will offset the gain in your property. So you could pull $50,000 out of the escrow of the property you're selling, and that will be offset by the $50,000 loss you had from earlier. In that case, so you pull that money out and you pay no tax on it. So again, sit down with your tax guy, and as far as that 2-year thing I was talking about, it's not a set rule. It's a bit of a gray area. I mean, that's what I've seen over and over and over with people, and I've never heard of a problem with it. But again, your CPA is the guy who's signing on the dotted line saying he prepared your tax return. So you really want to sit down with him and do some planning ahead of time so you don't get caught. Okay, so one thing that a lot of people are doing fix and flips. Fix and flips do not qualify for a 1031, okay? And the reason is the IRS says that you have to hold that asset long term. Now, there's no set rule on what that long term is. That's why we talk about 2 years. But in the end, you can't fix a property up and turn around and sell it right away and do a 1031. You're going to get taxed on it. Now, what you can do is fix up a property and rent it out for a couple of years, and then you sell it, right? Pardon? A delayed flip, there you go. Or you do the thing where, you fix, I'm doing a couple right now. I buy property, I fix it up, and then when I'm done, I refinance it, get my money back out of it, and then I can use that to buy another property, and I keep the other one as a rental, and then I'll wait another year or two and then do another 1031. Quick question?
So the uplay and the downlay, the ready proof is the income tax return showing at least 2 years of rental activity.
Exactly. Yep. And again, check with your CPA because it's not set in stone, okay? But generally, that's the generally accepted rule. All right, so the other thing, what they call an inventory. So if you see a developer, they buy a piece of land and they're going to put 10 houses on there, develop them and then sell them all off, that you can't do a 1031 exchange either. If you're building something and selling it right away, that's going to be ordinary income, believe it or not, right? Or I've worked with people that have done condos. They built a condo project. Well, I worked with one guy over in Montrose, actually, and he built a 20-unit condo building. He ended up renting it out and then selling off units over time, over about a 5-year period. And then that way it qualified. But just to build the condo and then sell off all the condos right away, that's going to be taxed, okay? Oh, the other thing that comes up quite often, actually, is partnership interests. So a lot of times people go together and they create a partnership and they buy a property, right? Well, if you're going to do a 1031, all those partners have to exchange together in the partnership. So whatever entity that you had before you sold the property has to mirror the entity when you sell the property. Make sense? So if you have a partnership, and again, this comes up fairly often, where there's maybe 3 partners, one of the partners wants to get their cash back out and the other 2 want to do an exchange, that's a bit of a problem. So what you do is you break up the partnership long before you sell the property. You can't do it right away and then sell it. You want to do it, prior to that. Again, talk to your CPA. And you break it up into a tenants in common, and then each person can take their money and do what they want with. So if you say you had 3 people, tenants in common on a property, one person wants to cash out, well then when the escrow closes, he'll be able to do that, and then the other 2 guys can take their money and do exchanges. Yep.
When's the earliest that you brought that?
And that's a CPA question. From what I've heard, you want to do it 6 months prior to listing the property. But I don't know, that's a CPA question. I don't know. It's one of these areas there's no set rule, I don't think. Yeah. But you should be okay with that. Bonds, notes, stocks, none of that kind of stuff you can exchange. Now, I kind of clarify this because prior to the update in the tax rules when Trump got in, you could actually exchange all kinds of things. Believe it or not, a lot of artwork in America was done as a 1031 exchange. Yeah, you could do artwork, you could do cars, people had exotic cars and stuff, they would do exchanges. There was all kinds of interesting things, but that all went away with the new tax. Like Trump's tax bill was awesome. My taxes went down a lot, but he got rid of everything but real estate. Now he's a real estate guy, so I don't know, that's probably why, but but the only thing we can exchange today is just real estate, nothing else. Okay, so now let's talk about how many properties that you can buy when you're doing an exchange. So there's several different rules here. We're going to walk through them. So The most common rule that everybody knows and understands, and probably at least 95% of all the exchanges out there, are done under the 3-property rule. And what the 3-property rule says is, when you identify your property for your up leg, so the down leg is the property you're selling, the up leg is the property you're buying. So the IRS says you can identify 3 properties, and they don't care if you close on 1 of them or 3 of them, whatever you want, but you're allowed to identify 3. Okay? So a lot of times people are going, okay, I want to buy this particular property A, I'm going to identify property B and C in case I can't close on A. Which again sounds good in theory, but it's kind of tricky doing the paperwork on that. Because again, look, I've seen everything you can think of. I saw a really wealthy man that came to me, and he was insisting on certain kind of property he wanted to identify. I mean, he basically was doing it on his own. And what he did is he identified 3 property, but he didn't have them under contract. What do you think happened? He lost all 3. He ended up paying tax on a big exchange. We're talking about $10 million plus exchange. Yeah, it was very dumb. So again, when you are picking these properties, you really want to feel confident you're going to close on them. All right, so the rule that I use the most with my clients is what's called the 200% rule. So the 200% rule says that whatever the value is of the property you're selling, you can do up to twice that amount in identifying the property you want to buy. Right? So if you sold a building for $3 million, you have to identify at least up to $6 million of property. And it doesn't matter how many. You get to identify 1, you get to identify 20. But as long as you don't go over that 200%, you're fine. And they don't care which ones you close on. So there's lots of room in there to identify extra properties as part of your exchange. But this is a good rule. We use it a lot. I've done some exchanges where literally we've bought over 20 properties, from one exchange. And so this works perfect for that. And I'm a big fan of diversification. And also when you're working between different parts of the country, here in California, the numbers are usually quite a bit bigger than Texas or Florida or these other markets. So it's easy to take, a big chunk from here in California and split it up into 5, 6, 7 properties in other parts of the country and diversify. Now there's another rule called the 95% rule, which we're going to skip it. The reason is I've never ever seen this rule used. It's kind of an odd rule. It's one of those ones that somebody wrote it up, way back when and never really thought it through, I guess. But this rule says that you can identify as many properties as you want, but you have to close on 95% of them, which basically means you pretty much have to close everything you identify, or the whole thing gets negated, right? So it doesn't really make sense. So we're just going to ignore this one. Yeah, like I said, I've never seen it used. Okay, so we're kind of addressing your question earlier about, if you're cashing out or how much equity. So the rule here is when you're replacing your property, the total value of what you're buying has to be equal to or greater than the property you sold. So if you sold a property for $1 million, you have to identify and close on at least $1 million worth of property. Okay? If you close on $900,000, what happens? You have a $100,000 piece there, we call it boot, that you're going to have to pay taxes on. So now again, you may want to do that, right? You may want to pull out $100,000, go do something else with it, pay some debt off, or your wife wants a new kitchen, that kind of thing. I've seen that happen a lot. And yeah, you just got to be aware of the fact that it's going to be taxable unless you have some other loss you can offset it with. Yeah. But again, that's part of your planning. Oh, and the other thing real quick, some people come to me and say, well, look, I had a property for, like I said, $1 million. There was a $500,000 loan. I had a $500,000 cash from the sale. I'll just buy something all cash for $500,000. You can't do that. If you sold the building for $1 million, you have to buy $1 million. It doesn't matter what the debt is. The IRS doesn't care. Because a lot of people buy property and it goes up and they refinance it and pull cash out, right? So they don't care about the debt. It has nothing to do with the exchange. What they care about is you sold the property for $1 million, you have to buy at least $1 million worth of property. Yes?
So it's not necessarily the value, it's the sale price.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we can all argue about value, right? I always tell people, they go, oh, my property's worth this. And I go, look, your property is worth whatever someone's willing to pay for it, and that's it. That's the deal. So in the end, it's what you sell it for. And again, you're going to have your settlement statement and everything else that's going to show that. Okay, now, the other thing that comes up, people go, well, Why do I keep exchanging? I'm just going to have to pay the tax on it later. Well, there's a thing called a step-up in basis where we can get around that. And what the step-up basis says is that whatever the original basis we talked about earlier is, when somebody passes away, they get a step-up in basis, which means you could have bought a property for $100,000, somebody passes away, it's now valued for $1 million. The surviving spouse, for example, can now sell that building for $1 million and pay zero tax. It's a wonderful tax rule. The problem is somebody has to die to get it. But it also applies to heirs. You know, like, again, the parents pass away, property gets a step up in basis, the kids can sell that property and pay zero tax. Not a problem. That happens all the time. And another cool thing happens, you know, I've seen a lot too, where there's, you know, they have a portfolio of income property, husband passes away, the wife doesn't want to sell the property, but she gets it all valued again at the step up in basis value, and now she can redepreciate all that property all over again as if she just bought it, which is a huge, huge benefit. Huge. And again, the same thing with the heirs. If the parents pass away, leave the property to the kids, they can now depreciate it all over again. Now, there is another tax, which is the estate taxes, which is a whole different issue, but as far as the capital gain, it all goes away. And that applies to stocks, it applies to a business, it applies to anything that has a capital gain. So it's a really, really great rule as far as that goes. And right now, and don't quote me on this, the estate taxes right now, it's around $12 million you can pass on and there's no tax. So most people were fine. Yes?
Going back to the step up for the spouse, the surviving spouse, is that assuming that the property was not the joint title?
Well, okay, so between husband and wife, as long as it's community property, and one spouse passes away, the surviving spouse who keeps the property gets the step up. Yeah, as long as it's community property, it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so here we're just showing this step up in basis, and like we're talking about, you know, some people's bases are really low because of depreciation and the fact they've owned the property for a long time. One person passes away, the whole property gets a step up in basis. And there's a special tax return called a 721, I think it is, and then you're going to go get appraisals done and prove to the IRS what the new value is, and you shouldn't have a problem. Okay, so again, one of the cool things about doing a 1031 is you can diversify. So you can sell an asset in California, and a lot of people like to see their money spread out a little bit more. Again, you have some good equity here. You can buy property in Texas, you can buy property anywhere in the country, so geographically you are spreading your risk, but also by types of property. So again, a lot of people, like I said, they've sold an apartment building here in LA or Orange County, and then we take that money, we can buy a triple net lease property, which is a very low risk type property, somewhere else in the country, which we've done a lot of. Or here we're showing manufactured homes. This was an example actually where the client of ours, they actually sold a restaurant in Alhambra just before COVID, good timing. And we took that money, we got them a Popeyes, and we also did some manufactured homes. And yeah, they had no interruption in income during the whole COVID thing, so it worked out good.
Is there any limit to how many the properties you can diversify? Or?
No, if you use the 200% rule, you can do as many properties as you want, as long as it's, the limit is 200% of what you sold. Okay, so let's change subjects a little bit here, and we're going to talk about interest rates and what's going on. We are in a strange market right now, economically, in my opinion. I mean, it's very odd what's going on. Well, first of all, we have obviously inflation. So the Federal Reserve, their mandate is to keep inflation down below 2%. So we had this big jump in inflation over the last couple of years, and they jumped the rates dramatically. Now, I've been doing this long enough that the very first property I bought, when, believe it or not, it was 1981, and I paid 12% interest on the mortgage back then. That was normal. No one even thought twice about it. You know, the rates we saw over the last, 10 years or so were, never before in history have we seen rates that low. Well, you're right. Well, it's 15 years really. You're right. But it's been, after 2008, they just pushed the rates down to practically zero. That's never happened before, right? So we got used to these low rates. And so anyway, they've raised these rates. They're kind of softening a little bit. But until we see that inflation rate get down to 2%, we're not going to see any big drop in interest rates. Look, we're all hoping that rates go down sooner than later, but it's all dependent on the inflation. So we'll see how that plays out. This is just a survey that was done, And almost 100% of the institutions surveyed felt that by the end of this year, rates were going to come down. We'll see. We don't know because the Federal Reserve is in charge of that. And like I said, you want to watch that inflation rate. As long as it stays above 2%, they're not going to noticeably drop the rates. So we kind of have to live in this world. Now, this is an interesting graph, a really good one, I think. So this is showing us that for every 1% drop in mortgage rates, 5 more million people in America qualify to buy a home. So if rates go down 3%, that's an extra 15 million potential buyers for real estate. It's a lot of people, right? But the reverse is when the rates go up. For every time rates go up 1%, that's 5 million people that are taken off the table and can't buy, right? But what that's telling us, though, now that rates have gone up, is that as the rates go down, a lot more people are going to be piling into the market. And then there's also, I have a lot of investors I'm talking to, and they're saying, look, I don't want to buy another property until the interest rates go down. Well, what's going to happen when the interest rates go down? Right. Exactly. A lot more people, not just these potential new home buyers, but also all these investors that have been kind of waiting to buy something at a lower interest rate, right? And they're all going to be piling in the market. And again, we're in this odd situation where, well, I was talking to First American Title the other day, and they said that the volume of transactions last year dropped 70%. It means only 1/3 of the volume is happening right now in real estate. That's a big drop. But have we seen prices go down? Why is that? Supply and demand. I mean, if there's less transactions, you think that the price would go down, right? Well, how many people here have a mortgage that's like 3 or 4% on your property? Do you want to sell that property and buy something and pay 6 or 7% or more on the new property? Nobody wants to sell right now. There's very limited inventory. I mean, I just talked to a broker the other day in Glendale. I was surprised. There was a fourplex went on the market in Glendale, and it was on the market for about $2.2 million. 42 offers, 27 of them all cash. And this is just in the last 2 weeks. And that got bid up $500,000 over the asking price. There's a lot of buyers out there, but there just isn't the inventory. And also with the interest rates the way they are, it's really hard to make the numbers work, with property right now, rental property. So you have to put a lot of cash down. Anyway, and then there's another big pressure on the market right now for single family homes especially, is a lot of institutions are buying single family homes right now, rental properties. And they're inventorying them and collecting the rent and everything off. So what does that tell you? Well, those guys usually aren't dumb, right? In fact, I have some property in Florida, and I was surprised. An institution called me just yesterday and asked if I wanted to sell my property. I said, well, look, I'm in the middle of renovating it. He goes, that's great. We want to buy properties after they're renovated, and we don't have to worry about it. I go, all right, call me in 2 months. Yeah, so they're out there buying aggressively right now. And I've run into them in other deals. I've run into them in Indianapolis and other markets. So there's a big pool of money out there with investment companies that are out there buying single family. This company, Tricon, if you look them up, I was shocked. They own 38,000 homes, single family homes in America. They're actually out of Toronto. That's a lot of homes. And they're buying and building all the time. So there's a lot of big groups out there. And I see ads now for, I think it's homebuyers.com. There's a bunch of groups now that you see advertisements on TV. They'll give you an offer in your home. And a lot of those they're buying for institutions. Here's Atlanta, and that's showing us that 25% of all the rental homes in Atlanta are owned by institutions. That's a big percentage. So that's another whole group of buyers that are putting pressure on the market. And then you look at the millennials. I know my kids are getting, in that age group, and now they're buying homes, their friends are buying homes, they're starting to have kids and everything. And that group of millennials is bigger than the baby boomer generation, which was a big group of people. There's 84 million millennials, and they're all jumping in to buy properties now too. So there's a lot of pressure on housing. The other thing, I hate to bring it up, but we have this whole issue of illegal aliens coming in. We've had like 8 million come in supposedly in the last 3 years. Where are they staying? Now they're probably not home buyers, but they're living somewhere, right? So again, that's more pressure on the housing market. It's a lot of people to put somewhere. So again, all the statistics are showing that property is not going to go down unless we have some total catastrophe in the economy. All right, so now let's talk about some markets. Houston is a market that we've done a lot of what we call manufactured homes. And so a lot of people have a bit of a misconception of these. In Texas, you're not allowed to call them mobile homes. They're manufactured homes. But they're actually pretty nice. And these parks we're dealing with, we have a deal with a group that has many, many parks in the Houston area and also in Louisiana. And so when they buy a park, a certain percentage of those manufactured homes in the park are owner-occupied, and a certain percentage are owned by the park and they're rentals. So when they buy these parks, we kind of worked a deal with them, worked out really well actually, where we will have investors buy the mobile homes that are owned by the park, the rental ones, and then they will continue to manage them. That raises a lot of capital for the group that owns these manufactured home parks, and then they can take that money and buy another park. You know, they're kind of recycling their money. So it's a nice little niche. It's been working out really well. And when we do these, they're usually around 10 to 12% cash flow to the investor, which is really nice. And again, Houston, if you go back, I mean, really anywhere in Texas, if you look back when we had the recession, it really didn't go down very much there. It held up really well. The job market there is fantastic. A lot of people, right now, Florida is the #1 state for people to moving into, and Texas is #2. So the job market there and the economy there is just very, very healthy.
Do they own the land as well?
Sorry?
They own land as well?
Oh, good question. In fact, so when you're buying these, you're just buying the unit. You're not buying the land. Okay, and they're on a 30-year land lease, so it does qualify for a 1031 exchange. So we've done a lot of these in exchanges, and I'm just showing here, I mean, these are actually really nice. Any of the ones we're doing, they're either newer or they're recently renovated, and they also have a tenant in place with a lease. So you're buying something that's all in good shape. It's really easy to rent them there. Usually when they're empty, they lease up really quick. They're in good shape. Oh yeah, and we have a maintenance program included in this, which means that you're paying $48 a month, and then if you know the hot water heater breaks or the toilet backs up or anything like that, it's all covered. You don't get billed extra. It's just a flat fee, which works out really good. Because again, so many people complain that they get nickel and dime to death from their management, so that won't happen here. Anyway, if you guys are interested, we have some information on it. Here's a couple that we have available right now. These will actually go really quick. Here's one that's in Louisiana. It's only $30,000. They just finished renting it, and they just put a new tenant in there, and it's paying over 13% cash flow, which is really good. Well, this one was older. This was probably 30 years old, but they totally gutted it and did the whole interior over again. All new flooring, new kitchen, the whole bit. And also the company we're dealing with has a 2-year buyback program. So anytime after 2 years, they will buy the unit back from you for the same price you bought it for. So it's you don't have to do that, but it's a backstop. And then here's another one. This one's $48,000. Again, this one's in Louisiana also. We get a little bit better numbers there. And this is paying 13%. Okay, so let's talk about Beaumont real quick. I'm running low on time here. No? Okay, no problem. Well, anyway, Beaumont, Texas is about 2 hours east of Houston. We've done a whole bunch of properties here. I have a man that we work with, and he literally owns 150 properties in this market. And he's bought them, renovated them, put tenants in them. And every once in a while he goes, okay, I got 5 of these I want to sell. And so we'll have investors buy them. He will continue to manage them. He has his own management team. But it's been working out really, really well. Now, why Beaumont? Well, Beaumont's got the largest oil refinery in the world. Huge. And they're expanding it even more. So the job market there is fantastic. And we've never had problems with tenants here. The tenants we've had here have been great. And these are nice homes. In Texas, it's a different world. Yeah, so you can get financing on these. They're usually going to be between $120,000 and $250,000 a home. And again, it's going to come with a tenant. And it's been recently renovated. Like I said, Charles we work with, he has his team go in, totally renovate them. Most of the houses he does this with, he keeps himself, but then every once in a while he's like, he wants to buy some other property, whatever, so he sells some of them, and then we have investors buy them. So these are all off-market properties, but again, we've had a really good run with them, and they've gone up probably 30% in the last 3 years in value, so they do have appreciation, and they're probably going to pay around 7% cash flow if you buy these right now. All right, just to talk about another market, Florida. So Florida is a great market. It's the #1 state right now for people moving. They're saying 2,000 people a day are moving into Florida. So there's a lot of pressure. Now, I grew up in Canada, so anybody in the Northeast, whether you're in Canada or America, knows Florida, right? Spring break, you're going down there. Every year we go down there, get a break from the snow. And so you get a lot of people you know, Airbnb down in Florida, and it's a great market for retirees, obviously. But there's also a lot of other things economically going on there. You guys ever follow Bruce Norris? You know who that is? Anyway, he did a whole study. He's big down in Riverside area, kind of a real estate guru. Anyway, he did this whole study a couple years ago. It was actually really good. And he sold everything he had in California and put everything into Florida, which was a lot. But he was showing how, you know, all these people that are moving down there to retire, as they get older, what happens? They need more and more services, right? They need more. I mean, I went through this with my folks. You know, you have to have someone come in and help clean the house. You have to have someone come in and check on the person. There's more medical appointments, all this kind of stuff. And so there's a built-in employment growth there by having all these retirees moving to Florida, which is probably the biggest market there. So there's a lot of jobs there. Right now, Tampa Bay and south of there is one of the most active markets in the United States right now. So anyway, if you guys are interested, today I don't have any to show you, but we will have some real soon. We're doing a bunch of renos. And yeah, it's a really great market for renting, and it's a really great market for appreciation. The market there is very healthy right now, very healthy. Yeah, and so the kind of price point you're looking at here is probably between $300,000 and $500,000 a house, which, I mean, believe it or not, you can buy a brand new home in Florida for $350,000, brand new, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, in good shape. So it's a different market. So that's why I think there's a lot of upside here, because a lot of people going here are coming from Connecticut or New Jersey, where they're selling their house for $1.2 million and then buying something for $400,000 in Florida. So there's a lot of upside. And with the growth there, you know, I really think we're going to see some good appreciation over the years. And again, it's a great market for renting. Okay, the other market we do is Indianapolis. We have a very similar scenario here to what we talked about in Beaumont, Texas. There's a man I work with. He's got a whole big inventory there. He buys them, fixes them up, and then puts tenants in there. He's got a management company, and it's worked out really good. And these are price points, and these used to be real low. We used to buy these for $60,000 to $100,000 all day long. Now it's really hard to do one less than $100,000. So most of these houses are between $90,000 and $160,000. And again, they're fully renovated. They've got a tenant in them, and they're going to be about a 7 or 8% cash flow. And so anyway, we have, you know, brochures and all this. So how's our timing doing? 2 minutes, okay. All right, so just a couple quick case studies, and then actually Bob at the back, he's gonna hand out a little cards. So if you guys wanna fill that in, give it to us with your email and phone number, we'll put you in our database. And you know, if we do seminars periodically, and also when we have deals, we email them out to clients. And also if you wanna get the slides, you know, put on there you want the slides and we'll email them to you as well. Anyway, just some examples. I was going to talk about triple net lease properties real quick. These are ones that we did in the last few years. But okay, so here's a quick case study. Here's a client we were dealing with in LA. He had 2 triplexes. We sold those for him, and we took the money from that, and we bought a triple net lease in Indiana. We did some of those Beaumont properties and some of those manufactured homes. So his income went from $88,000 on the LA property to over $150,000 on the new property we did. And that's pretty routine. I mean, it's actually really easy to increase somebody's income once you go outside of California. And it's just the way the numbers work. I talked about this one already. Yeah, so I mean, tons of examples, you know, because we do this all the time. So yeah, so if you guys are interested, and you don't have to do a 1031 exchange to do this, right? We have a lot of people just buy manufactured homes or buy these houses on their own. But you know, the majority of what we do is 1031 exchanges, but we have lots of investors that just buy stuff, you know, individually. So if you're interested, Bob, where's Bob? There's Bob. Say hi, Bob. So Bob works with me also. He's a real estate